He's focused on the big blind with the ace-king of spades. Just going to call this, and that's surprising. Obviously, trying to disguise the strength of his hand. But then again, ace-king of spades can be a tough hand to play when you miss the flop. Obviously, much easier here that he's flop top pair, top kicker. He checks over to on the Mac, who's also flop top pair. He's going to bet a little bit under half the pot. And Bokenha just going to call. Nine of spades. Doesn't look to change anything. Jack 10 would have gotten there. But in a heads-up situation, four-handed, you can't always be scared of the nuts. Bokenha checks one more time. And on the Mac could actually check behind here. There's not much he can beat. Can't beat Jack 10 anymore. Really can't beat a king. And on the Mac is going to check behind. A little bit of pot control. River's a 5 of clubs, and you imagine Bokenha will put a value bet out there. Maybe about 1.2 million. I was going to say 1.5 million, but either way. And on the Mac has to pay him off. He does, and it's a nice size pot going over to Bokenha, who's now over 16 million chips. On the Mac, down to 19 million chips. Give him some credit, though, to keep that. He kept that pot small, didn't lose much, even though he flopped top pair. Bokenha raises to 3x. Was that going to call? Very unorthodox. Most internet players are raising at 2x, 2.2x. And when I say x, of course, I mean 2 times the blind or 2.5 times the blind. Bokenha making it 3x, 3 times the blind. Much larger raise than most players do these days. He checks, was that, says, okay, you don't want the pot, I'll take it. Bokenha can't fold this, though. No, he's going to call. He check calls. Unfortunately, when you take this line, this passive line post-flop, like Bokenha has taken, it makes it very, very difficult to win the pot later on. It goes check, check on the turn, though. I thought was going to fire again. He didn't want to get check raised off his draw, though. And now Bokenha bets, and this bet really makes no sense. I mean, unless you're going to get somebody to fold ace-queen or ace-king, I mean, I can't imagine you ever get a pair to fold. It's one of those bets where I don't think you can ever get called by a worse hand, and I don't know if you'll ever get a better hand to fold, except maybe ace-king or ace-queen, but on a board like that, you might even get called by ace-king. Anyway, you cut it, though. We've got a new chip leader. Bokenha now over 20 million chips. Was that? Doesn't believe him, though. He's going to 3-bet. Bokenha calls the 3-bet with 8-deuce. Strange play here at the Sunday Million. And it's a good flop for Bokenha. He's flopped a flush draw. Queen high. Was that checks? Over to Bokenha. Checks behind. He takes the card. And was that might try to represent here now. No. Really has no interest in this pot, it seems, after a 3-bet. It was a small 3-bet, too. The original raise was to 1.2 million. He made it 2.4 million and just decided to give up when he couldn't win it pre-flop. Bokenha now up to 24.6 million chips at hand 54. Jump ahead a couple of hands. Blinds now 200,000, 400,000. They've actually been that for a little while. On the Mac, on the button, with the hand. Makes it a little bit over 2x. You imagine, yeah, Bokenha's going to defend this. Got King Baby suited. It's an interesting flop, because generally speaking, when you get a paired flop, it's unlikely to have helped your opponent. But at the same time, this is a very wet board. And when I say wet, I mean draw heavy. You've got straight draws out there. You've got flush draw out there. Nonetheless, I imagine on the Mac, we'll put a continuation bet out there. Now, he's going to check behind. It doesn't shock me. But I thought he might put a C bet out there. Bokenha bets. Can't imagine on the Mac folding this. Now he's going to call. And the river's a blank. And Bokenha's going to bet one more time. It's a really small bet. It screams value. You know, he could be betting an 8 here. Obviously, he's definitely betting a 7 if he has that. But he also could be betting a lot of bluffs that are in his range. On the Mac knows that, and he calls. Great call by On the Mac. And he checked the flop, obviously, to keep this pot small enough so that maybe he could make a good call on the river. And that's exactly what he does. Great call there by On the Mac. Rizza raises 2x. Bokenha calls. That might bring Was That. Yeah, Was That is in there. And On the Mac, even in the big blind with Jack-6 offsuit, does not want to get involved. He gives it up. Big flop here. 8, King, 9. Couple of clubs out there. And we've got 2 players with flush draws. And Was That with a pair of 9s. Rizza, by the way, has the straight draw to go along with the flush draw. Was That shoves. Rizza's probably going to shove over the top. He calls. Bokenha might call this as well, you imagine. He's got the nut flush draw. He does call. Wow, what a hand. Pot is nearly 16 million chips. And the turn is a 7 of hearts. Rizza sleeps with angels. I'm telling you. I mean, obviously, his hand was fairly strong, but when he's up against a bigger flush draw, his hand was not nearly as strong as it could have been. And he now shoves. He's got the nuts. Bokenha gives it up. And that is it. King of Diamonds on the river. Will do it for Was That. Was That needed a jack on the river to chop it up. Not going to happen for him. And Was That from Toronto, Canada, out in 4th place. $65,000 richer. A raise here from On the Mac on the button. And Rizza calls. We saw him earlier do this with Jack-5 of spades. This time he does it with Jack-6 of diamonds. And once again, he flops something. This time he leads out. On the Mac with top 2 pair, though. Really, really impressed with On the Mac's game. He came to the final table as a chip leader. He is now currently 2nd in chips. He's going to raise right away. And Rizza calls. He's in terrible shape, Rizza, by the way. And he's now drawing dead. He can only win this pot if somehow he gets On the Mac to fold. And he puts out this garbage block bet. You don't think On the Mac is going to see right through that? Rizza bets $400,000 into a pot of $6 million. Now, maybe against inexperienced amateur players, this small little block bet will work. But there's no way this is going to work against On the Mac. It screams weakness. On the Mac is going to sniff this one out. And there you go. There's the raise. Now, I have seen some players put out that small little block bet to induce a bluff raise or to induce this kind of raise. And Rizza calls anyway. 3 of hearts on the river. You're going to see like, what, a 1 million chip bet from Rizza? And On the Mac's not going to believe him and shove? No, Rizza checks this time. Over to On the Mac. Here comes a big bet. 6.4 million. And Rizza can only beat a bluff. And he calls. Oh, I tell you. Heart palpitations I'm having right now. Well, I can continue to be negative, or I can talk about how well On the Mac is playing. He's our chip leader with 36 million chips.
Growing up on the circuit, everyone wanted to offer me advice. When to bet, when to fold, when to raise, what to wear, what to eat. But there was one piece of advice that took me to a new level.
Daniel, Don't do anything stupid.
At PokerStars.com, there's a tournament starting every second. Develop your game at the world's largest poker site.
Welcome back to the Sunday Million Highlights Show. You've been waiting for the password? How about Boken? That's right, Noah playing in the World Series of Poker main event right now in Las Vegas, Nevada. Playing quite well, last time I checked. Three-handed on the Mac, our overwhelming chip leader. On the Mac has won a tournament, $50,000 on Stars in May of this year. So, on the Mac, definitely on point. Hand 89, Rizza, who is our short stack, with about 12 big blinds, wakes up with aces. And Bokenha, does he want to gamble? He's already in there for $1.5 million. He figures, you know what? Maybe I got live cards. Unfortunately for him, he's got 2 live undercards. Well, he flops the jack, but he's way, way behind Rizza with the aces, and that's going to do it. Rizza will double up to $13.3 million. Bokenha down to $8.2 million. And I hate to harp on the last hand before we had the break, but Rizza with the Jack-6 diamonds. Earlier on in the show, we saw him have Jack-5, where he ended up playing that hand badly, losing to On the Mac. And this time, he has the Jack-6, overplays his hand, and loses a vast majority of his stack. Nonetheless, he is in second place right now, and he might be heads up after this hand. Bokenha all in with King-7 of clubs against On the Mac's pocket kings. 9, 8, 3, nothing there for Bokenha. He needs running cards. That's it. Bokenha is out. The Brazilian gone in third place. There was no chop whatsoever, by the way. Bokenha earns himself $93,895, and we are heads up. And I got to tell you, this is literally David versus Goliath. On the Mac, as far as I'm concerned, has the skill and the chips. A raise from Riz on the button. On the Mac, in the big blind, and as always, the small blind is on the button. Has to act first pre-flop, but gets to act last post-flop. On the Mac, 3 bets. Rizza calls. And Rizza's flop an open-ended straight draw. Not much there for On the Mac. Pot is 5.6 million chips. And I do apologize to Rizza. I'm giving him a lot of grief. At the end of the day, we started with 5,796 players, and he is heads up for the Sunday Million title. So I got to give him props for that. On the Mac leads in for $2 million. Love the play by Rizza here. He shoves. He's open-ended. Figures he has some fold equity, and he does. And if you're going to play Jack-9 of diamonds and you flop an open-ended straight draw, that's the way to play it. Well done by Rizza, and he's now up to 18.6 million chips. On the Mac raises on the button. Rizza calls. Couple of clubs out there. Action on Rizza. He's going to check his flush draw. On the Mac needs a 10 to hit Broadway. He has the overcards, as well as the ace of clubs. He's going to check behind. Rizza bets 1.2 million. You imagine On the Mac will call this. Part of the reason for On the Mac checking on the flop is to keep this pot small enough so he can make that call on the turn. He does. And there's a 10, and it's a club. Oh, it's a magical card for Rizza. It gives On the Mac Broadway. Rizza shoves. Can On the Mac get away from it? He's got Broadway. And he folds. Great laydown. Wow. It's a paired board, plus 3 clubs out there. And On the Mac figures Broadway is no good, and he lets it go. Great laydown by him. I'm intent on finding out who this guy is On the Mac. And of course, it could be a woman. I have no idea. But I'm so impressed by whoever it might be, their play. And it's all going in here. We had a raise, a 3-bet, a 4-bet shove. Rizza calls.